If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Benjamin Franklin said that once upon a time, and he was a very smart guy. And I happen to think he was absolutely right. Planning is a huge part of the organizing process, and if you skip it, your project will likely not turn out the way you imagined it. So in this lesson, we're talking all about planning out your goals, making them tangible, and actually moving towards achieving them. This step is a big source of frustration for a lot of organizing clients, especially those who've hired pros before because they've failed a million times. They want to actually do something like right away, right now. They don't want to chit chat about their hopes and dreams. They don't want to strategize on a piece of paper. They want to start sorting right away. And they are usually very impatient and excited to start what they believe to be the actual work. And I understand why. If they're paying for my time, they want to make sure that they're maximizing it. And they want the problem fixed stat. I get it. I would want that too if I were in their shoes. But there is one thing that I know to be 100% true, and it's this. Skipping the planning part of your project will set you on a trajectory towards failure. I'm afraid there's no way around it. No matter how boring it sounds, you have to plan ahead. Your project will not succeed unless you plan its success. And the actual work that many of my clients think the sorting is, that's actually the easy part. If you have planned properly, that part is over in minimum time. The planning is the real heavy lifting. That's the majority of the project. Imagine this. Disney has decided to make a new movie. So the producer goes out, grabs a few actors and a camera, and starts shooting scenes. How do you think that movie is going to turn out? Yep, you guessed it. It would be a complete train wreck. Not to mention over budget by the time they actually figured out what they wanted to do. I made that mistake myself, many times actually, when I was younger, because I was so eager to get started with all the fun stuff, But I've since learned that time is money, and there is no better way to waste it than to be running around without a plan. A movie needs a script, a director, a camera crew, locations, nice costumes, storyboarding, a theme, a target audience, a budget. The list goes on and on and on, but I'm sure you get the point. And if you're a content creator here, you certainly know the drill. There is a production process that belongs in any project. And in project management, we use that production process to help us get to the right outcome. The same is true for the organizing process, because your project is actually no different from a movie. They're both projects after all. So in all of project management, there is a planning phase, a pre-production phase, a production phase, and a post-production phase. Remember that, and you are off to a great start. Resist the urge to run to the Container Store first thing. Yes, admittedly, that is the fun part, but you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff you don't need, and you will be over budget. There's beauty in spontaneity. I love spontaneity, but it's for those times where we have flexible outcomes. When you want a fixed outcome, we have to plan for it. So how do you do that? Once you have your defined goal statement, then what's next? Well, we have to clearly define the parameters of the project. So how do you do that? You do that with SMART goals and with small steps. SMART is an acronym, S.M.A.R.T. So let's cover what that stands for. S is for specific, because goals that lack steps and a plan for how you will execute them fail, period. The more specific your goal is, the easier it's going to be to achieve, because you'll have a better understanding what's required to get to the finish line. What's the purpose of the project? Who, when, where, what, how? The more questions you can answer, the better. So make it specific. A sense of why you're doing what you're doing will help you stay motivated in the long run. M is for measurable. So how are you going to measure your success? How are you going to track your progress? Pro athletes find this very easy, because for them, it usually just means getting a faster time. But what if you don't have numbers to work with? Then what? For an organizing project, that can take any number of forms, So To do this, you need to break the project down into manageable pieces, and then once you have those pieces, you can measure it in any number of ways depending on what makes sense. So for example, you can measure in months, in weeks, in days. It doesn't have to be minutes or seconds. You can measure by progress, like saying, my stack of junk mail used to be this big and now it's this big, right? There are many ways to measure, and it's limited only by your imagination. So you just have to be able to quantify the progress somehow. It's really motivating to see progress, and it's necessary for you to review where you're at any given time. So make sure you do that. A is for achievable, because goals that are unrealistic fail. So is your goal something that can actually be achieved? If your goal is to find the fountain of youth, you may be in over your head. Now, I want to pause here for a minute because I want you to understand something fundamental. Don't sell yourself short. So when I say achievable, what I mean is possible. And when I say possible, I'm talking about goals that are physically possible, not things that defy the laws of gravity or common sense. So to give you an example, if you said to me, Caroline, I want to be a world champion boxer, best in the world, I would say, great, that's a big goal, but it's possible to achieve, right? But if you said to me, Caroline, I want to fly to the moon and back without a parachute, then I would go, let's make that a bit more realistic. How about we add the parachute and then we put you in a space shuttle? Now it's possible. So you see, I want you to reach for the stars, preferably even beyond. But we also want to make sure that your goal isn't so difficult that you give up before you've even started, because that's not motivating. And to build onto that, we have to make sure that we implement milestones along the way so that the steps to success are small enough to achieve before you move on to the next one. I teach a lot around micro goals because the heaviest piece of anything is always taking that first step. It's the most scary part by far and can feel really daunting at times. So that's why we want to start with the absolute smallest task that you can possibly imagine. And that's the best way to get started. So do that and you'll find your momentum in no time. Let's move on to R. R is for results oriented. Some people argue and say that it's for relevant, but I don't think that makes any sense. If it wasn't relevant, you wouldn't be doing it in the first place, right? I would at least hope not. So I don't think that makes any sense. So other people will say that it's for realistic, but to me, that's the same as achievable. So I'm going with option 3, and that is results oriented. That means that we're going to focus on results rather than just being busy. I don't want you to confuse being busy with getting things done. There is a big difference there. And when your goals are SMART and you're working towards something important every single day, that becomes very clear. Accomplishment speaks way louder than busyness. So make sure you focus on results and don't listen to anything else. Finally, we have timely. T for timely. Goals that have no timeline tends to fail because they just don't get priority. So if you have a timeline, you will act on your goal with greater gusto. It makes your goal real and it forces you to be accountable to yourself in a very different way. As long as you keep your goal realistic and achievable, you're going to benefit far more from having a timeline on it than from giving yourself an infinite amount of time to work. Because goals without a timeline, like I said, rarely get first priority. So having a deadline will force it back up in the rankings where it belongs. And that's where it should be if it's important to you. So now that you know what it means to have your goals be SMART, let's put that knowledge into action. So what if your goal was to organize your closet? And what if it wasn't a SMART goal? What would it look like then? Well, it would most likely sound something like this. I would like to get my closet organized. While that is a fine goal, it is not specific and it's definitely not timely. So let's make it a better goal. And remember that we also want to throw in bottlenecks or hints of bottlenecks if we can, so that we have more details around what strategy we want to implement. When it comes to devising a plan of action, that really, really helps. So let's work with the example that we had in the last lesson, which was I want my closet to look nice so that I won't have to scramble in the morning by looking for things. It'll make me feel less stressed, and it'll enable me to start my day in a much better way and feel more confident, right? Great goal, but let's take that and let's make it SMART. So let's make sure it's specific, realistic, and measurable. And let's also make it achievable in smaller steps. And then finally, let's put a deadline on it. So how about this? I want my closet to look nice so that I won't have to scramble in the morning by looking for appropriate clothing. It'll make me feel a lot less stressed, which will then enable me to start my day in a better way, and it'll help me feel more confident. I want my wardrobe to be organized by color because I'm a very visual person, and if complete outfits could be stored together, that would help me make much quicker decisions around what to wear. I will accomplish this goal by July 15th by coordinating one outfit per day and hanging it in the most accessible spot by color and size. And since that date is 2 months away, I have 60 days to complete this goal. I'll do that by checking in every weekend to make sure I stay on track with the project. And I will make sure I put that on my calendar to get it done. Do you see how that's a much better goal statement? It's specific to its purpose around why you're doing it, why it needs to happen, and the benefits that you're going to get from achieving it. Do you also see how it's measurable and achievable, and we have numbers and a deadline that we're working with here, and a plan for checking in on the progress and staying on track? It's not overwhelming at all because we're taking small steps over a longer period of time rather than doing everything in a weekend. And that way, the project is not going to eclipse other things in our life, right? And then finally, by putting it on the calendar, we guarantee that it's going to happen because it's scheduled. So when you have a plan, everything changes. Some people argue with me around the planning phase, and they say things to the effect of, look, Caroline, I can't possibly plan anything here because who knows what'll happen down the road. I don't have all the answers up front. And the clarity that I'm looking for is going to come from the action that I take when I start the project. So to that I say correct, absolutely correct. You will never have all the answers up front. But what we can do is define what we already know, because we have to start somewhere. And by planning out what we know at this particular point in time, that'll help make that first step feel a lot less daunting, right? And that's how we get started. So we're just going to make the best decisions we can with the information we have available to us right now. Yes, more clarity will come as we work on it. And when it does, then you can go back and you can refine your goals. This is all a cycle, and that's another step, but more on that in a bit. For now, just think about how you can make your goal statement a little bit smarter. Any little bit that you can put in helps with clarity, even if you don't have all the answers. Go ahead and do that now, and I will see you in the next lesson.